My name's Serene Timoteo. Samoan for Timothy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, and it's also Spanish for Timothy, but I'm not Spanish.
What?
I can be.
I got a parrot of hair on my shoulder. It's apparent it's there and it's bolder. Like I show you my cards, I'm no folder. Yes, I'm a soldier.
Serene is an artist. I would call her artwork modern, contemporary Pacific art, but today you get to hear her tell her story. You get to hear her explain her passion and why she makes Pacific art. She gets to explain through her artwork what plastic Samoan means, what identity and culture is. So we'll get to see and hear just her story and her passion.
I've always been fascinated by like Pacific traditional craft and just stuff that Pacific women hand make in the past and that they're currently still doing today. I wanted to make something that had or spoke to my generation because I knew I didn't have the patience to replicate what they did or even the skill and materials, but I wanted to do something using things that I had or was easily available, and I wanted to do stuff with a lot of colour and vibrancy, and just the emporiums down the road, or there's just so much colour and vibrancy, and I wanted to use that in my works. But then I also wanted to play on the stereotype of being a plastic Samoan.
Brown skinned girl on the other side of the room. Brown skinned girl staring with a brown eye.
Growing up, I always thought it was like a negative connotation, like it was always a stereotype that made me feel like I wasn't full Samoan, or I wasn't, the language barriers what disqualified me from embracing being a full Samoan. So I wanted to use that plastic stereotype in a positive way by making my works out of plastic, and that's where I started to really use the plastic mats. And I think they've become like a staple piece in Pacific homes too. Like they use them at the beach, they use them in their homes, in the sitting room, on top of carpet, on top of floor, and it becomes part of the fabric of a Pacific home, I feel. And so that's why I wanted to take it off the floor and put it on the wall in a different way and weave into it phrases and colours that relate to my generation. You weren't built to be build-ups. I made that specifically for the Auckland University Library at Window Gallery, and I requested that I could show during end of year study break before end of year exams, and I just wanted students to see it and also students to believe the words I had woven in, because exams can be a stressful time for just students in general, and I feel like PI students put a lot more pressure on themselves because of like family, what goes on in the home. And so if I could use a language that they could understand because they created it, I wanted it to be bright and just capture their attention. I feel like there's like a Pacific kind of wit, and that's what I hope would come through in my work. Like I want my works to be visually familiar but then also socially familiar, that people can relate and be engaged, because there needs to be more Pacific presence. Sometimes you always veer off to like post-colonialism and noble savages and dusky maidens, and like for a while I tried to see if I could relate to that. And like, to be honest, it might sound sad, but I couldn't relate. And I think that's the best thing that I could have realised, because like, I would have kept making art that was speaking to a generation way before my own. And I was neglecting like my generation I was living in. And so yeah, I hope my work speaks to my generation.
And that was Serene's story. If you want to see more of her artwork, live or in person, she has an art show on September the 19th at Studio One on Ponsonby. Go and check it out, see more of her artwork and her inspirations.